The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 8, where Amazon have been saving all their big reveals, hoping for an epic finale. But after 7 hit or miss episodes, can they end on a high and leave us wanting more? Well guys, let's find out. But as always, before we start, if you enjoy what you see here and you want to see more Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, The Witcher, and so much more, please consider subscribing, and I would really appreciate it if you throw a like on this video as well. But yes, episode 8 of The Rings of Power. It's all been building to this. Sauron is finally revealed, we are closer to knowing who the stranger is, and the 3 elven rings of power are forged. Nenya, Narya, and Vilya. But as always, the usual issues are ever present, the pacing is messy, and logic was thrown out the window a long time ago. 1 minute Halbrand is on his deathbed, but he's alright to do a 6-day ride to Region, he's just fine now. We have become accustomed to these elements in Rings of Power. I don't think it means we should accept them, and I am hoping for big changes before Season 2 in a couple years, especially with the writer's room. I think that needs a big shake-up, and supposedly Season 2 is going to be less fan-fiction-y and more true to the canon that Tolkien wrote, but guys, I'll believe it when I see it. I know at this point many have given up. For me, I know it hasn't been brilliant so far from it. If I'm being honest, I would give this show a 5 out of 10, but I will be back for round 2 in a couple years. But guys, I promise I will be calling out the issues and praising the show when it's justified. I think I'm always fair, and I'm hoping you guys feel the same way about me. Honestly, I never wanted to be the guy that just comes on here and blindly praises them, and I never wanted to be the complete opposite. There's stuff I like about this show, there is stuff I very dislike. But I think episode 8 is one of the better episodes because things actually happen. For me, I think episode 6 is still the best. That's my favourite. And I was hoping the final 2 episodes would ride that high, but episode 7 was just one big waste of time. And for me, I felt everything was relying on episode 8. And it kicks off with the Mystics finally catching up with the stranger. They showcase their shapeshifting abilities with a big fake out moment where one of them pretends to be Nori and we think they're going to attack the stranger, but it turns out they declare that he is Sauron, their master, and they wish to recover his memory and power. And I suppose that would have been a neat idea if 5 minutes later Halbrand wasn't walking around Region with a giant I am Sauron sign on his face. It was finally revealed in this episode that Halbrand was Sauron, as I've been telling you guys for months. I think Charlie Vickers is one of the best performances on this show. As Halbrand, he dipped his toe into the anti-Aragorn kind of storyline, but for me I felt it was so obvious he was Sauron. Not the Witch King, nor the King of the Dead, but rather the Dark Lord himself. And now the actor's free of the shackles of trying to hide who he really is, I think he can really let loose. And even though I don't think how he got here has been perfect, I'm excited to see what he can do. But I do wish they would have more of a canon version of the story, where Sauron comes to Region disguised as Anatar the Lord of Gifts, an emissary of the Valar, here to teach the elves how to forge the Great Rings of Power. And in the books this occurred over 300 years, but on the show it's all crammed into 5 or 10 minutes of him recommending using alloys to strengthen the little mithril they have, or winking at the camera saying, it's a gift. But I do think Sauron will be back in Region in Season 2 to forge the 7 for the dwarfs and the 9 for the men. Because Galadriel never outed him as Sauron, she told Elrond and Celebrimbor that he is not who he says he is and not to treat with him if he ever returns, but she never told them he was the Dark Lord, and she allowed the 3 rings to be forged. And Elrond only knows that he is not the King of the Southlands, and Celebrimbor is completely in the dark. So I think Sauron will be back in Season 2 in Region when Elrond and Galadriel are busy somewhere else in Middle-earth. And Sauron declares to Celebrimbor that he is in fact Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, an emissary of the Valar, here to guide the elves into forging more power. Or if they can't use that name because of the rights issues, he'll become someone else. And he'll make up some excuse for why Galadriel kicked off. And Celebrimbor, having already seen the wonders of the Free and having a taste for power, wants to surpass his grandfather, Feanor's legacy. So he falls for it and forges the 7 and the 9. But this time, Sauron has a more active hand in their forging and adds a little bit of his own ingredients to the mix. And I believe in the books the 3 are forged after the 7 and the 9, They're never touched by Sauron, so that's why they don't corrupt their bearer, but they're still bound to the One Ring because they're made through Sauron's teachings. Of course, the show has mixed it up a bit, the 3 are forged before the 7 and the 9, but I think the overall beats will still be there. And at the end of the episode, Sauron returns to Mordor, and his gaze is fixed on Mount Doom. It's likely in Season 2 he'll forge the One Ring and take over the land from Adar. And he'll probably build Barad-dûr in a day. If I'm being honest guys, I think the writers have left themselves with a lot of problems, especially with the time compression. I get why they trimmed the timeline down, and I think they would have to do it no matter what, but if I was writing it, I would have had time jumps, just like House of the Dragon, and Season 1 would be mostly Sauron and the elves. But it's too late to go back now, we'll have to see how they fix it for Season 2, which like I said is supposedly truer to the books, but of course there's still going to be all the stuff that Amazon invented, including the Stranger and Nori's adventure to Rhûn. And right now the Stranger has been revealed as a wizard, but it's still open to who he is because he didn't actually tell us his name. But with all the direct quotes from Gandalf such as "follow your nose," it has to be him. But they're heading to Rhûn, which is where the Blue Wizards go after arriving in Middle-earth. Maybe Amazon have left it open so they can pick the better option once they get the fan reaction and all the headlines are out there. Or maybe they'll just combine both elements, where it is Gandalf but he kind of does the Blue Wizard story and heads off to the east. And as for the Mystics, they seem to be servants of evil, some sort of cult of Morgoth from the east who wish to make Sauron their new master. But it turns out they were wrong, and the Stranger is revealed to be a wizard, but he manages to defeat them, gain his memory back, and uses their staff to kill them or banish them. And it is revealed they have some sort of Nazgul-like wraith form. And I think that's them messing with the unseen world. And they're not actually Nazgul because the 9 rings don't exist right now. But I think they're some sort of proto-Nazgul, some beings that have been messing with the unseen world. I don't think that's a bad way to describe them, but honestly I didn't care for the Mystics. They were brought in far too late. Was it episode 5 they first appeared in? I think they should have showed up far earlier. I was more interested in what was happening in Eregion with Sauron and the forging of the Free. As for Numenor, I did not care one bit. The king is dead, and Iarion looks into the Palantir, likely seeing the downfall of Numenor. Pharazôn's reaction to the king's death was a nice little moment that foreshadows his feelings towards mortality, but I think this was all lost in the more important moments. Nobody will remember Iarion looking into the Palantir in a couple years, because everyone's talking about Sauron and the Stranger. I think the Numenor storyline should have ended in episode 7. I think if you take away all the debates about canon, new characters and new storylines or whatever, I find the structure and the pacing of the episodes are their biggest issue. They threw the book away a long time ago, and at this point part of me just says screw it, give me evil Sauron and evil Galadriel as the Dark King and Dark Queen ruling over Middle-earth. Perhaps that would be a more enjoyable version of what they're trying to do right now. But guys, make sure you post your thoughts on episode 8 and season 1 as a whole. I think it's far from perfect, but I do think they could perhaps salvage something for me, but I know many are done with this show. Personally, I think Durin, Elrond and Khazad-dûm's storyline was the best for me, but then it just ended with a big dumb Balrog teaser straight out of the trailer. Guys, for me it's style over substance, and can we stop reusing quotes from other parts of Tolkien every 5 minutes? Once or twice is fine in big moments when it's warranted, but I lost count how many times they've done it in this episode. I know prequels are known for this, sometimes it works, but let's not overdo it. But yes, like I said, season 2 is likely coming out in a couple years. They're filming right now in the UK, so that gives me the perfect opportunity to maybe take the car and find out what's going on. If they're filming up in Scotland at some point, or in the north of England, I might take a look. But guys, I will say this before I go, it has been a very interesting experience covering this from the last 7 weeks. Or even before that, all the way back to the Super Bowl, from 2017 when it was first announced. It hasn't always been fun as well. The fandom is split right down the middle, but I will say this, it's fine to like the show, and it's also fine to criticise it. But it's not okay to say that anyone who likes it is a shill, or anyone that criticises it is a hater. I've been called both, even in the same video, and if you asked me 5 years ago if this is the show I wanted, I would say definitely not, but I want the comments to be fun, and be a safe place for all Tolkien fans to discuss this, or anything else that's coming, like the War of the Rohirrim in a couple years, and I wouldn't mind another big budget Lord of the Rings video game. But yes guys, I think I've rambled enough, so I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in season 2.